Hello, welcome to my presentation. My name is Melissa Cano, and in this research proposal, we will go ahead and investigate how does climate change affect snake speciation in Western Diamondback rattlesnakes. Why even study how climate change affects snake speciation in Western Diamondback rattlesnakes? Climate change hits every corner of a balanced ecosystem, causing a change of events. We have been tracking climate change, and what we have observed is a drastic change in temperature, animal extinction, catastrophic events, and the overall health of all living organisms on Earth. According to a study done by the Indiana University, researchers determined that, quote, the ranges of species will have to change dramatically as a result of climate change between now and the year 2100, because the climate change will change more than 100 times faster than the rate at which species can adapt. As our climate changes, changing habitats and ecosystems of the eastern and western diamondback rattlesnakes will too. And that home may end up being your own backyard. Recent studies done by the University of Indiana suggested that the Western Diamondback rattlesnake would be displaced entirely from its current range in the southeastern U.S., with only a temperature increase of 6.4 degrees. Rattlesnakes are actually really good indicators of climate change because they are ectothermic, which means that they depend on the environment to regulate the body temperature. The existing unknowns are, to what extent does climate change affect a snake genetically? Since the temperature and climate increases, snakes will migrate from their original regions. Once they do migrate, they will be able to interact with other cousin snake species, and we want to go ahead and determine if they will be able to mate with their corresponding species, isolate themselves, or crossbreed. We want to go ahead and determine how will their gene flow change in order to overcome these ever-changing environments, and if they would be able to adapt. The methods for this research is that we want to go ahead and mirror all of the environmental factors an actual snake would encounter in the wild. So we want to go ahead and have them in an enclosure. We're going to go ahead and increase the temperature in that enclosure, just as how they would be experiencing out in the real world due to climate change. We want to go ahead and catalog all of their behavior, have name tags on them, and see if they have mated with their own breed, if they crossbred, if they isolated themselves. Now, if they do mate, we can go ahead and conclude that the genetic gene flow is changed as a source of this happening due to climate change, making the snakes change regions. Our study population will be a total of 20 Western Diamondback rattlesnakes and 15 Mojave Green rattlesnakes. Now, the Mojave Green rattlesnake was particularly chosen because they are to a close proximity of the Western Diamond Rattleback snakes, so they would encounter this species out in the wild if they did in fact move regions due to climate change. When snakes typically crossbreed, they do so with, we want to go ahead and say, the same species, such as a rattlesnake. That's why we chose the Mojave Green rattlesnake, because of the demographics and all of their attributes they also include. Now, to the right, I have a figure of a table where I go ahead and explain the independent variable for this research, which would be temperature, and we are measuring in degrees Fahrenheit. Our dependent variable is the behavior, which we will measure by if they mate with the same species, crossbreed, or isolate. And the standardized variable, we're going to also measure in behavior, and we are only going to have Western Diamond Rattleback snakes in that enclosure to go ahead and have a control group to have something to go ahead and determine that these snakes would not have bred with this cross species if they were not put in that situation due to climate change, due to them changing regions. Procedure. There will be 2 enclosures that will be controlled with temperature. Within each enclosure, the area will be divided into 2, Area A and Area B. Enclosure 1 will contain both snake species, while Enclosure 2 will only have the Western Diamond Rattleback snake to have a standardized variable in the research. All snakes will begin in Area A of the enclosure, where the temperature will gradually be increased to make the snake migrate from Enclosure A to Enclosure B, where the climate will be much more habitable. With this, we want to calculate the exact degree where Western Diamondback rattlesnakes begin to change regions. Then, in the habitable enclosure, Enclosure B, the Western Diamondback rattlesnakes will begin to pair among other snake species, such as the Mojave Green rattlesnake. We will monitor the behavior of the Western Diamondback rattlesnake to see if the snakes mate with their corresponding species, crossbreed, or isolate themselves. Our ethics statement. We want to go ahead and take advice from sanctuaries dealing with snakes, along with advice from professional zoo environmentalists that pertained on the research of how to build an ecological system fitted for our species' needs. This way, the snakes will be protected. We want the snakes in a safe environment to be able to test them and study them in any angle without creating any stress. As well as we want to go ahead and follow all of the regulations of the IACUC. To protect our workers, the protocols are that no worker is to be alone during the enclosure at any time. And before entering the enclosure of the snakes, for whatever reason, we want to go ahead and protect our worker with a padded suit. We want to go ahead and have our employees safe from any angle, and we want to give them maximum security in preventing all accidents. To that, I do want to add that there will be a veterinary available at all times, as well as a doctor, in case anything happens or any medical attention is needed. The environment will also be adjusted so that any need that may come up can be upkept, such as plants, water, etc. If our hypothesis is supported, we should observe that snakes begin to migrate when the temperature enclosure in the enclosure A rises between 3 to 6 degrees, and once they move to regions B, we want to go ahead and observe the Western Diamondback rattlesnakes crossbreed with the Mojave Green as we predict. And this will conclude that due to climate change, these snakes migrated, came across a cousin species in a different environment, and changed their genetic gene flow. Broader impacts. These results will impact the community of researchers by making it clear that climate change is the source of the Western Diamondback rattlesnakes, affecting their structural gene flow in future generations as they will begin to crossbreed. This will send alarms among different research groups studying varying species, as this will ultimately affect the balanced ecosystem, and even more detrimental consequences could be brought up. This will also bring awareness to the general public because they themselves will be affected, as when snakes migrate from their original regions, they will start to pop up in regions where they have never been seen before, and they might end up in your backyard or in other areas. Fun fact. Female Eastern Diamondback rattlesnakes are ovoviviparous. I hope I didn't butcher that. Which means that they can carry their eggs inside their body and maintain their eggs at a certain temperature until they hatch. Now, my last slide is the references, and this brings my presentation to a conclusion. Thank you so much for listening, and take care.